Hello, Taurus. Thank you so much for being here, you guys, as always. And happy birthday. Happy birthday. I'm so happy that we're moving into Taurus. Now, looking at your oracle cards, though, the way that you kick this off, I think it's probably better that you guys are dealing with this now rather than waiting until after your time in the sun. So from Lay Vampire, you pulled the past to prison, bitterness, grudge, and refusal to let go. And then from Chakra Wisdom, you pull recovery. Very simply, you're going to have to face it. You are going to have to face that pain if you want to have that sense of recovery. Now, the past to prison is saying that, these are things that you've been hanging on to for far too long, right? Whatever pain you have had in the past, it's time for you to look at the bigger picture now. Right? Once you have that sense of recovery, you're going to get to a place where you feel like, all right, Taurus, here's your overall for the week. The Fool. The Fool. I always get a little bit iffy, though, when I see that as a signifier. So then, it becomes a question of, are you needing to take a leap of faith into something, or is this, blind optimism, right? And you're getting ready to fall into something here. But I do like the Fool, right? A lot of times when I see this, I think, you need to just go. You need to just do it, right? Because like I've always said, it doesn't matter that you don't know what's going to happen here. But this being the signifier is either going to be about, like I said, you needing to jump on something here, or this is you like blindly falling into something. Okay, now in the past, and immediately looking at the two, for me, it's almost like, okay, so the Fool is the overall. You may have something new that's happening for you, obviously, here with the Fool. But if you've experienced painful endings in the past, then it's like, okay, can I just jump? I've experienced this before. When I've done this, should I do this again, right? Now, that, I think, is the only thing that is coming through right now with the Ten of Swords. But it's because it may be holding some of you back from jumping on something, right? Because things may not have gone so well before. In the present, the Six of Pentacles, just very simply looking at it, it's, you have to have something, like somebody needs to give you something before you're willing to do this, right? I think some of you are I think you're wanting to jump into something new here, absolutely, but you've got to see something first, especially if we're talking about a situation that you've been through before, but for a lot of you, I think that this is new, and I think that Ten of Swords may be a separate thing. Like it's not the same situation. It's like, because I don't see Taurus doing that. I don't see like, okay, so this situation is coming back around again. It ended really badly in the past. Why would you even consider the Fool? I think that this is a brand new situation, but it's because of what you've been through before in other situations that you're like, no, I can't do this. I have to see something first, with the Six of Pentacles being there. Before you're willing to give the same amount, right? Equal give and take. Oh boy. All right. Future conditions, the Seven of Cups. But I'm waiting to see what's happening here. I always, like, this to me, like, holds more importance than anything else, because I'm always saying that, because I look at how it's directly connected here. Now, with the Seven of Cups, though, as future conditions, this has been coming up a lot for me looking at this one here lately. You guys know me. A lot of times cards will take on a different feeling based on the week. But I think that for some of you, you're not really paying attention to the reality of the situation right now, because there may be, some expectations as far as what's going to happen. Right? The Seven of Cups, it's fantasizing, right? Now, yeah, you could definitely be saying here that you may have other options, but the problem is that there is an emotional expectation on what you think is going to happen. Reality killing the fantasy is what I'm getting the most for this week, it seems like. But I would be careful. you know? But, on the other hand, though, like, what I'm hearing is that you're wanting to jump on this based on the fantasy because something, or someone may have given you just like enough for you to like not look at this or pay attention to this anymore. But I do still think that there's hesitation because of something ending badly. Oh boy. Your best path to follow, the Chariot. For some of you, it's very simply needing to move and needing to move quickly on possibly a new job. Could be a relationship, general reading, right? But with the Chariot, it's not just things at a distance or, traveling and having to move. It's also about getting control, right? Getting control over the opposing forces before you can start to see that fast momentum, right? But there's also that sense of victory there. But I don't know. I'm looking at this as advice, and I'm like, okay, so you need to go somewhere. You're going to have to actually, pick up and go. And this is like a major move, a major trip, and like I said, I think a lot of you are like, yes, I just want to go ahead and jump and do this. But then, at the same time, like you're in fantasy land about what's going to happen though. But I don't know. I almost see this as a good thing, but then I'm going back to this going, well, then, what's the deal here, right? Oh, in your environment, the King of Cups. All right. All right. I don't want to say it, but like, for some of you, you may feel like a person is living up to the fantasy, possibly. Now, with the King of Cups being in your environment, yes, we are talking about another person. We're talking about somebody influencing you. Now, as far as the personality goes, right, with the King of Cups, you can be talking about because of this person being in your space and giving you, something here with the Six of Pentacles. It may be that, you are looking at things from, a little bit of an emotional distance. I don't like, how do I say this? So when we're looking at the King of Swords, for example, he comes off as being emotionally detached. The King of Cups has emotional distance. And it's not that he's not still there being, loving and supportive. It's just that he knows not to get like overly involved in, somebody else and somebody else's emotions, right? Versus the Queen of Cups, she's like head first into it. Now, definitely for some of you, could be dealing with a water sign, Cancer, Scorpio, Pisces. But it's like somebody's giving you something that is just enough, and I mean just enough, for you to think that they may be living up to the fantasy and you may be, looking at making a major move here. But I don't know. Like, I'm still looking at this and I want to get to here now and clarify it. Like, why? But then again, right? Some of you may be like, well, he is an option, or she, or whoever this person is definitely an option here. But, you may have other things that you need to think about though, too. But you're still like fantasizing, right? Taurus. Oh, I'm telling you, the Two of Cups, your hopes and fears. I do think that some of you have an expectation surrounding this person, and maybe it's you needing to get emotional control. And you definitely have Cancer showing up here, but I'm looking at this and I'm going, But I don't know. I still think that Ten of Swords is like a separate situation for some of you. Absolutely, it could be that there was a painful ending in the past with somebody in your environment. And now, they're giving, but, is it real though? But yet I'm still going back to your advice, like, all right, that's huge. Why are they needing to move very quickly then? But then I look at this and I think of hopes and fears and fantasizing, right? And wanting to have an emotional connection, wanting to have a business partnership, right? Wanting to see eye to eye with somebody. Wow, Taurus, right? And then the Page of Wands coming out. I wonder, looking at that, if that isn't, because when I look at the Page of Wands, first of all, when we're talking about communication, this is the news you want to hear. These are the things you want to hear, right? and it makes you want to go. Like, I'm ready to take that new path now. I'm ready for this. And then the Knight of Pentacles. All right, I gotcha. Okay, so here's what I'm seeing happening here. I do think that for a lot of you, and especially with the Oracle cards, right, the past to prison and then going through a sense of recovery, which is great, but you need to face the pain, right? Now, with the Fool, again, being the overall, we're talking about you taking that leap of faith into something, right? Do you jump or do you not? But I think that the reason why that's the main here, the main focus or main energy, is because you have somebody in your environment that gave you just enough to possibly, live up to the fantasy that you have surrounding having an emotional connection with them. You may hear really good news, and for some of you, you're going to have to make a big move here. With the Ace of Wands, absolutely, you're talking about a new beginning. Now, beyond relationship, we're talking about a new creative venture, absolutely, especially with the Page of Wands. And these two, for me, are very closely connected. I feel a sense of, not just excitement, but like a want to have this happen because you're excited to see what's going to happen in the future because of the Three of Wands, right? So you act on this, you act on it and, kind of waiting to see how things are going to go, and I think that once you initially start to see things develop, you're looking at slow progress, though, coming out. Because, and then I go back to the fantasy, right? Absolutely, you could be looking at other options, but this coming through, though, I think is something that you're ready to move on. But it may require, definitely some traveling here to get to this point, absolutely, or somebody needing to come to you. But because this is your advice, I think it's you needing to go the distance here, or make the trip or make the move. But with the Knight of Pentacles coming out, if you talk about you being a little bit cautious, but I think more so that it is progress. There's still, a lot of work to do. I think that some of you may be focused, how do I put this? One track mind, right? Because he's methodical, right? There is a way of doing things to get what you want, but we're talking about, moving forward slowly and caution, right? But it does lead to continued growth. Now, absolutely, if we're looking at a business partnership, it looks really good. It's just going to be like a slow going process, and if you're doing things on the creative level, maybe it's, bringing those fantasies out and making them happen. But I still look at it as really good, really good. I don't feel anything bad around this other than what you've been through before, right? But that past, again, the past of prison, it can hold you a prisoner or it could help you move forward, right? And resistance, why? You and Aries. All right, detachment, right? You need to detach from the fantasy. You need to detach from the painful things that you've been through. Wisdom is saying that, you need to look at what you have learned, right? When we're talking about wisdom, you're talking about, I've experienced so much. This is what I have learned from this, and this is how I'm using, my knowledge now to make things different in the future, right? But resistance, you're resisting shit. Don't do that. What you resist persists, right? Don't resist needing to close the door on a painful past, because what you're looking at coming out here looks really good. I can understand the caution, but you don't want it to stop progress though either, And then I look back at the Three of Wands and I think, are you still waiting to see and things just, moving a little bit too slow? And then does that revert you back to, oh, it's going to end badly. It's going to end badly. Don't do that, right? And be authentic to who you are. You are asked to be real and true pertaining to who you are and how you feel. Yes. Yeah. And right, definitely if you're being asked to be authentic, then yeah, you're going to have to be not so much authentic to other people, but to yourself about, why that Ten of Swords is still coming through. Now, love endures. You know, if you've been through some difficulties in, relationships before, right? It doesn't mean that it's never going to happen for you again, or love is not going to happen for you again. Oh my God, if I could explain shit right today. So love endures. If you've been through painful things in the past, painful breakups, painful endings, falling flat on your face after, having faith in a person or a situation, love endures is saying, despite the fact that you've been through that, it's still there for you. But you need to be real with yourself, especially when it comes to expectations. Don't expect things to end badly, and don't have expectations surrounding, situations and other people without, first experiencing something first. Wow, Taurus, wow. But I don't know. I go back to that chariot, and I think it's not just on an emotional level that, there needs to be control. But I also feel like, for a lot of you, if you're wanting to see, what's going to happen here with this Ace of Wands, you may have to make a major move, or do some, traveling here to get to that. But you may jump this off like really excited to see what happens, but don't get disappointed and start thinking about other things if you're not seeing like quick progress because of the Knight of Pentacles coming out. But then I also feel like that's you though too. And don't be stubborn, right? But if we are looking at a relationship here, I do think that somebody is giving you just enough to show you that they're willing to meet you halfway, possibly. All right, Taurus, so let me just start from the beginning here. Looking at the Fool as the overall on this, I think that some of you have in the past jumped on something and landed flat on your face. And, with the Ten of Swords being there, I do think that this is a separate situation compared to what you're looking at now. Now, for some of you, absolutely, there may have been a painful ending with a person, but it looks like there's, just enough. They're giving you just enough to think that this may be something worth jumping on again, right? But I still see the hesitation there with the Fool. I think that you want to, but based on what you have experienced in the past, it's a question of whether or not you're going to just go with blind faith on this because of what you're seeing from this person. Now, with the Seven of Cups, I mean, yeah, we could be talking about you looking at other options, but I think more so, there's two ways that I feel about this. If we're looking at it in a positive aspect, because of the Page of Wands coming out on this, it could be that somebody is definitely living up to the expectation, right? And then not only that, but if we're talking about a business partnership here, because of you hoping to have an emotional connection with somebody, looking at the Page of Wands and the Ace of Wands coming out, then it's, with the Seven of Cups, pulling things out of fantasy land and then, working on it on a creative end. But I think what's happening here, though, because we're looking at the Seven of Cups, is you move into a place, I think, because things start to slow down, where there may be an expectation for some of you that things are just going to end the way that they started, and you don't want to do that. And I do think that that's the reason why the Chariot is your advice. But then not only that, but there needs to be momentum forward. That could be as far as you internally, as far as willpower and self-control. But then this could literally be you needing to make a physical move, and then needing to have faith with this, because I don't think Spirit would be telling you to, with the Chariot, that's big, right? And then looking at the Fool as the overall, if that was an issue, I don't think that this would have been the advice. I think it would have been something else, I would have expected it to be the Knight of Pentacles, but I think it's things start to slow down. I do think that with the Three of Wands, you start to see initial progress, absolutely. But then with the Knight of Pentacles, it's, things start to slow down, but then I think that you start to become more cautious. The Fool is not a bad thing. The whole point of that, though, is that it doesn't matter that you don't know what's going to happen, right? Which is what I always say with the Fool. There is the blind optimism there, absolutely, but, you gain no experience whatsoever if you can't, at times in your life, just make a jump. I don't think that you're going to be looking at a repeat of the past. I don't think that that's it. I think that some of you think that that may be what is going to happen, but that's not the case here. You know, because I do see this as a good thing. I really do. The fact that you have somebody in your environment, you know, I think that they're giving you just enough, but it's really about meeting each other halfway, right? Which is possible. But looking at the past of prison and recovery, is it because of this person and what they're giving you that there's going to be a sense of recovery? You know, and things from the past finally being cleared out for good. You know, but either way, it's healing of the past, absolutely, with that Ten of Swords. But it's like you have to face it now, you know. Now, looking at the soul trees, definitely with detachment, needing to detach from the painful things that you've experienced. But then, you know, with wisdom here, right, the only way that you're going to gain any wisdom is if you detach from, you know, the expectation that things are always going to end up that way, but you are resisting it. And I don't like resistance because I tell people the same thing every time I see this. What you resist persists. If you keep resisting something that you don't want, what you don't want is going to keep slapping you in the face, right? And that's really where wisdom starts to come in here, where you don't do that to yourself anymore. Now, being authentic to who you are and love endures, absolutely, you know, despite whatever you have been through as far as relationships go, it doesn't mean that love is over with for you. But being authentic to who you are, you know, that is, to me, saying that you need to be honest about the fact that, you know, you have experienced that, but, you know, it's over and done with that Ten of Swords. Whatever painful ending, you know, whatever situation that you felt like you fell flat on your face with, you know. But be real with yourself as far as what you expect to see happen, though, too. You know, and again, I go right back to the fact that you're hoping for, you know, a good connection, right? The emotional connection, the understanding between you and another person. And that person is there, right? I would just say, Taurus, you know, don't start to think that things are going to go right back to how they started for you if things start to slow down, right? I can understand being cautious, but there is a way forward. There is a way forward with, you know, relationships, emotional connections, business partnerships. You have a brand new beginning and you're going to see results. Things may slow down, but, you know, don't sabotage yourself either here and think that it's just going to be over with like everything else.